In this video, I'm going to be explaining why I think that this document that they found in the mines in episode 8 is the missing link to deciphering the origins of Hexatombe. The actual story in the document is a group of people who find this mysterious door that presumably leads to Tenebris and fail in their attempts to open it, which causes basically a massive sacrifice and blood spill. Now, obviously, these pictograms might be the first thing that calls to your attention, but I'm gonna leave that to somebody who's better at cracking codes than me, and instead, I'm gonna look at the story that they are describing in here. For example, this middle part here, which according to the translation of the transcription that is on the Ordem Wiki, thank you so much Ordem Wiki for writing transcriptions, because talks about how these people feel an insatiable hunger, an unquenchable thirst. This reminds me of another document that was found in the Vermelho that talks about how the writer feels like he can almost not eat enough to quench his hunger or his thirst. The key difference being that when this document was written, it doesn't seem like any Hexatombe was happening, whereas this document from presumably 2018 is very much during an Hexatombe. What does that tell us? It tells us that these effects that people are feeling in the area actually belongs to the area or the bell and not to Hexatombe itself. Another thing that they detail in the document that we've seen happen in Hexatombe is that when they finally make their first sacrifice, a bell is heard. And not only that, the writer explains that his memory is a blurred stain of delirium and fascination, almost as if he entered some kind of trance whilst the sacrifice was happening, which feels a lot like the intention battles that we've been seeing. The last thing that stood out to me is something that we have seen hints of throughout the entire series, which I will get back to, but really came into play in that last episode, which was this feeling that part of the narration that Selbit was giving was speaking directly to the players, directly to the characters, asking them to do something, not as the GM, but as something else. Now, what could this something else be? I think it's the bell. In this document, the writer says that I heard it mocking us, judging us for the horror we had committed. And whilst that could obviously just be a figure of speech, and because of his state of mind of the horrible thing he has just witnessed, I think it's actually literal. Just like the characters heard some kind of voice urging them to do something, this person heard a voice mocking that their attempts were not good enough, urging them to sacrifice more people and spill more blood. Now, presumably this document is from around 1753, since it mirrors an actual historical document called Manuscript 512 from 1753. If that still stands in Ordem, that means it was written almost 100 years after the Seraphim Vermelho incident happened in the very same area, which I think is the second part of the key to the origin of Hexatombe. Now, imagine that you have this area under this weird spell or influence of Tenebris that are urging people to spill blood and try their best to open a door. It's bringing them towards them. And at the same time, you have on the top of the land a village of people living who are being misguided by a strong occultist, Seraphim Vermelho, pretending to be a god and giving them miracles or milagres. Suddenly, this guy disappears and the town descends into utter chaos, as was seen in this document. I think the retellings, the legends, the myths around these two events happening at the same place is what has, throughout the ages, turned into what we know as Hexatombe today. And through the retelling and the beliefs of what people are retelling, the paranormal present has just grown stronger. Seraphim Vermelho brought Sengi to an area that was ruled by Tenebris, and together the two merged into the Sengi Bell. Also, maybe the writing that's on the bunker's door can give us a clue about the final whereabouts of Seraphim Vermelho. Maybe he was one of the worthy ones who actually managed to get to Tenebris. And this idea that these two events eventually turned into Hexatombe through hearsay and speculation is also well documented throughout the RPG. Recently, we got some of the memories that the agents have been receiving, and Aguiar's agent talks about how the cults that his family was part of all originated from remnants of some centuries-old cult that was lost to time, and only distorted fragments of the original writings were used by a charlatan to manipulate a small number of ignorant and cruel people. his parents were some of those people. Distorted fragments of occult lost to time sounds a lot like people repeating things over and over until it starts becoming true, as we've seen in Ordem Paranormal Desconjuração, another season that we're starting to see some clear references to. I believe Giovanni also mentioned having studied some old documents, and we have this letter from Pompa, which says, "O corvo diz ter encontrado registros que datam desde a época colonial," which I believe is this very document, since it mentions colonialism, the Portuguese arriving, and things being from no mundo navigações. I don't think it's a far stretch that this is one of the documents that Corvo was studying when they were trying to make these rules down here, which we've later seen as the set rules for Hexatombe. Even the rules themselves have mirrors in the document. For example, this whole idea of wishes seems to come from the strong desire to figure out what's on the other side of the door, as well as the milagres or miracles that the townspeople were desperate to get back once Seraphim Vermelho disappeared. And this idea of somebody needing to be worthy of being a sacrifice could very well be from this segment of their first sacrifice, which was an elder from São Vicente, who said that he had to carry the sacred word of what had occurred here, but because people said that his blood was more pure, they thought that he would be a better sacrifice to try and appease the door, aka someone needing to be worthy to become the sacrifice. And as Cristino said, it doesn't really matter. They don't know how to read the document because it's all about intentions, just like everything else surrounding the bell of Coroa de Espinhos is. And speaking about Cristino, I think this document might be written by one of his ancestors because the writer seems to recognize the symbol of the door as being related to that cursed brooch, which is very much what this little medallion of Tenebris turns into once Cristino puts it on. And he wants to find it because he says that it was stolen from his family long ago, and his brother even had tried to come and fulfill the promise, probably a hereditary family promise to finally find out what is behind the door. So, what is behind the door, and why does it matter? Well, I think that this door leads to Tenebris, leads to the thing that Labyrinto is searching for, the origin of the labyrinth, perhaps even the origin of the membrane. And I think that Hexatombe came about because of various circumstances leading to myths and legends being created about this very place, the sacrifices that happened as described in the document, as well as the wishes people were desperate for, and the fact that Singi wants to see blood spilled and Tenebris wants to be opened. All of this also fits in neatly with two of my favorite theories that I've made so far in Hexatombe. One being from way back from episode 1, where Izzy and I was noticing some strange things happening in Selbit's narration. Strange things that I think are the exact same thing that we saw with the voices happening in the characters' heads and has been described in this document. But, of course, more powerful now because of the influence of Coroa de Espinhos for a prolonged time. Second, being that I think Tenebris has been meddling with the killer's minds and intentions for far longer than we noticed through the masks, supported by these red scribbles that were also described by Selbit as being kind of a visual representation of the ringing of the bell. I might do a video in the future combining all three theories into one neat narrative, but until then, you can find them on my YouTube channel if you're curious about hearing more. And thank you for watching. Let me know if you think I'm onto something, or if you have a different idea about what this document is trying to tell us.